Our government is too big. We have a government that spends too much, and we're bankrupting future generations, and we're not going to change that until we change this town. And we are falling off a financial cliff. And unless we finally do something about this debt we're placing on the backs of our kids and our grandkids, we'll never recover.
I won't place one more dollar of debt upon the backs of my kids and grandkids unless we structurally reform the way this town spends money.
I'm a freshman. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't think unless we force Republicans and Democrats to balance their books every year, they won't. Right. The only way we can do that is to force them.
People don't want to be financially responsible. You got to force them to do it. That's the message on the debt ceiling debate being preached this week by Tea Party Republican Joe Walsh. And really, Congressman Walsh should know that's pretty much how he became a congressman. When Joe Walsh launched his bid for Congress, it was thought that no Republican had a chance to win in the Illinois 8th District outside Chicago, that no one would actually defeat the three-term Democratic incumbent Melissa Bean, let alone a right-wing Tea Party challenger. And then this happened. The local newspaper put Mr. Walsh's personal finances on the front page, and they were a mess. A suburban congressional candidate who stressed the need for fiscal restraint lost a condominium to foreclosure last October, the same month he announced his bid for office, court records show. Now, this clearly wasn't how Joe Walsh was planning to run for Congress. He didn't exactly volunteer that information we saw. But once it was out there, he decided to cast himself as the regular Joe who was feeling voters' pain. So in response to the Daily Herald article, he said in a statement, quote, "I know all too well what 8th District families are going through to make ends meet because I've experienced some difficult and humbling financial times. Like so many others in Illinois in recent years and 1 in 9 Americans nationally, I know what it's like to lose a home to foreclosure." Now, being in a tough financial situation personally can give a person empathy and awareness for how bad things are economically for the nation. If you personally are experiencing foreclosure, you've been given a very personal front row seat to what post-2008 economic America looks and feels like. One can see how, for example, the voters would say, I want the Joe foreclosure guy who knows what I'm going through. I want the candidate who can feel my pain. In November, the voters of the Illinois 8th Congressional District elected Joe Walsh over the strong Democratic incumbent by 300 votes, which means Congressman Walsh now gets to be the de facto spokesman for Tea Party Republicans preaching fiscal responsibility. Joe Foreclosure gets to use his TV time to tell all Americans, including the president, to put their own financial houses in order. That was the deal.
I ran as a guy who lost his home and had financial struggles like a lot of Americans. This is where a lot of Americans come from right now. It's why they sent so many of us to Washington to do something about this, because we're living this experience.
But here's what voters didn't know about Joe Walsh when they heard him talk about his financial struggles. Here's what they didn't know when they trusted him to go to Washington to make sure their children's financial futures would be secure, too. What they didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to tell them, was that he had not bothered to fulfill his own obligations to his own children in the most basic way. According to court documents filed in December, Joe Walsh owes more than $1,000 in back child support to his ex-wife and 3 children, 9 years' worth. His lawyer disputes that it's anywhere near that amount, and Walsh himself says the Sun-Times article is a hit piece, claiming he was attacked to distract from his leading role in the debt limit debate. How leading? Well, Walsh calls himself, and I can't believe I'm about to say this on television, the tip of the spear. To the extent that Republicans have talked about the sanctity of family, the importance of commitment, here's someone who had a commitment to his own children, no matter what the broken down state of the relationship with his wife. Representing yourself as Joe Foreclosure is one thing, but a lawsuit that appears to cast you as Joe Deadbeat Dad is entirely something else. This debt ceiling battle is about the fact that if we don't raise the debt ceiling, America will be unable to meet her financial obligations. Joe Walsh doesn't believe that it will happen, at least not anywhere or on or near Tuesday.
We're so obsessed, Erica, with August 2nd. I think what's important is that we get this right. The administration has been trying to scare folks into this notion of default.
So you're okay with a potential default on August 2nd? You would let that date pass?
Erica, default's not an option. And look, the administration knows that. Most people in your profession should know that. We've got plenty of government revenues in the month of August to service our debt. Default isn't even on the table. I'm not obsessed with August 2nd, truthfully.
Joe Walsh is not so obsessed with August 2nd. With 4 days from now, that earlier tonight, he was one of 22 Republicans who voted against the Republicans' own debt ceiling bill. Now, part of the reason Joe Walsh might think nothing happens when you don't meet your financial obligations is that when it comes to child support, it appears he hasn't met those obligations for quite some time, and so far, at least, nothing has happened. But in 2008, when Joe Walsh stopped paying his mortgage, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. If America is going to base its next crucial economic decisions in this debt ceiling battle on the financial consequences that have been personally wrought upon Congressman Joe Walsh, I sincerely hope we will all remember that the bank actually did take his home. Joining us now to talk about this is Jonathan Capehart, MSNBC contributor and opinion writer for The Washington Post, and such a snappy dresser. Jonathan, it's good to see you tonight.
Great to see you too, Melissa. Doing a great job.
Thank you. Now, what are the implications of having a guy who lost his home to foreclosure and someone who owes nearly a decade of back child support, someone who doesn't believe the default is even a possibility, with him leading America as the tip of the spear through the next 4 days?
Look, his credibility on this issue is crumbling by the day. The takedown by Lawrence O'Donnell in the previous hour, your listed the dossier of damages against this guy is leading into that. And for him to call himself the tip of the spear, I think is sort of the height of arrogance. This is not coming to light because he is leading the Tea Party charge against raising the debt ceiling and pushing for balanced budget amendments and things like that. He is under scrutiny because he's put himself out there he's screaming for attention. He's getting it. He would love it if the Chicago Sun-Times, which found the court documents in this 9-year battle, they were working on a profile. He would have loved it if they'd just focused on the foreclosure, which is already out there, and did something else, maybe from his perspective, glowing about him. But instead, what they found was this 9-year battle over $117,000 in back child support payments. And now he's saying that this is coming to light because he is going up against that there's some sort of political hit. Right. And that just isn't the case.
Well, let me push you on that sort of political hit piece, because this is part of what I have found distressing. I mean, it's almost too easy to take a shot at this guy as the deadbeat dad who refuses to put burden, on kids. I mean, right. it's almost obvious. But part of what concerns me here is this language that default is just a myth, that it's a hoax, this idea that bad things won't really happen. How can we sort of sound the alarm, push back against that idea?
Well, look, this is the problem. We have never been in this situation before as a nation. We have always had a AAA bond rating. We have always met our obligations. We are now potentially going over the cliff in a way that no one has ever seen before, not here in Washington, not in America, not in the world, which is why I think people are in a bit of stunned shock, paralysis from the markets to world capitals. They cannot possibly believe that the United States would actually not raise its debt ceiling. And, quite frankly, no one knows what's going to happen. And Joe Walsh is trying to use that to say it's no big deal because on August 2nd, maybe the market doesn't crash. Maybe the world doesn't end. But it could a few days after that.
Yeah. Jonathan Capehart, MSNBC contributor and opinion writer for The Washington Post. We do indeed live in interesting times.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks for your time.